We first started talking when I found out you're a product engineer.
Yeah. Yeah, it was at the presentation for the micro school.
Yeah.
And, I let you know that I was recently laid off from my job.
Yeah.
And I told you, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you said, how's that a good thing?
Yeah, why is that good?
Why is that good? And I'm like, well, it's because I've always had a freelance wing to what I do.
Yeah.
Like I come home from work and I just work on my own projects, whether it's 3D printing, teaching myself woodworking, or something fun that I could also pass on to my kids and have them observe what I'm doing, because what I do at work, they don't always get to benefit from that.
Yeah.
So, even before I had kids, I've always had kind of like an overactive mind. So while I was working in jobs that required mechanical engineering, I was dabbling in architecture, because I learned the softwares in school, and they said, you could be whatever you want. I'm like, okay, I'll just be all the things, right? And it's easier said than done, but even if you don't have a lot of depth into a particular field, it's a lot more valuable to diversify your skill set, because what I realized is working in specific industries, how siloed they are, right? And solutions for problems have already been found in other industries, and they just haven't been adopted. You know what I mean?
What's something, is that where everyone thinks that these are the solutions, there's no way out, but then you start looking at another industry and go, could that be applied? Maybe it's smaller, maybe you're building a machine, but then you see...
Yeah, so machine building is, how should I say? It encompasses a lot of different disciplines. As a mechanical engineer, you're not just a mechanical engineer. You're also an industrial designer. You're engaging with the customer, the end user. You're talking to them about, I'm working with this coffee machine, for instance. I don't like how this button's next to this button. Sometimes when I'm, doing my thing behind the bar, I fat finger it or whatever. What if you could just move it a little bit further? And so you take all of that into consideration. And if it's a UI, like, just a graphic interface, it's easy enough to do that. But if it's a physical button, you got to think of that way ahead of the injection molding, in the 3D printing, and even in the conceptualization phase. Because once you've invested the money into the tooling, it's a lot harder to change that. And if you don't take the end user's feedback into consideration, it doesn't matter if you're serving a giant multinational conglomerate or a mom and pop type outfit where it's a millwright and they do work for local companies. If the end user's opinion isn't taken into account from the very beginning, you're just going to design something that is not ergonomic, it's not user-friendly, and a lot of times that is what causes a high turnover rate in the hourly employee space, right? Just bad working conditions, because nobody considered their outputs, right, from the very beginning. They have a lot of wisdom to share with you.
Like they may have an idea to fix the workflow, but the machine's already made. They've invested a lot of money. We can't change it now.
Yeah, and that's why with the advent of multi-axis robots, and there's all sorts of variants. There's Scarra robots, there's Delta robots. The temptation for big outfits is to just say this across the board. And it doesn't take into consideration the nuance of, hey, your hourly workers, your people on the ground, they actually have the highest exposure to the daily grind of what they're doing. And they, without even asking them, will optimize their own workflow in such a way that it makes everybody more efficient and, you know, profitable, but also reduces injury, right? Because they're going to get comfortable in their space. And by applying a one-size-fits-all solution, sometimes you miss out on that opportunity to have continuous improvement in your space. So recently I had a client come to me and they were considering using either a Delta robot or a gantry system to place a product from, you know, where it came in from the previous stage to the end user packaging, right? Something that would go to a grocery store. And I said, wait a minute, you're gonna spend $50, $100, $200,000 on this beautiful piece of technology that does everything. But really what you just need is an action, right? Just a singular action that is very simple. And long term, if you compare the cost of maintenance of your very complex robot versus a single actuation, whether it's pneumatic or electromechanical, it's just no comparison. Even the startup cost is lower. Mm-hmm. So why just go with what the consultant's telling you should do?
Yeah.
And just come up with a custom solution for your application that's replicable, that's adaptable, that you can take feedback from the end user and improve upon it continuously, right?
It reminds me of a simple light switch.
Right.
And how there's all these smart lights and things that can adapt to your phone and stuff. And like at the end of the day, we're all using light switches.
Right. Right.
How common is it in the industry that consultants and technology companies are pushing the next biggest thing when they really, the solution is really just a simple machine?
Yeah, it's got to be human friendly, right? And a lot of times, you know, there's a philosophy in industrial design that you have to design your product to be immediately apparent in how it's used without an instruction manual, right? For instance, if you've ever run into a door with a handle.
I just did this yesterday at Chipotle, and I posted about it, and everybody was like, my Chipotle has the same door, and everyone pulls on it.
It's bad design. You don't put a handle on a push door. You just push it. It should just be intuitive.
There should be a little hand there.
And, you know, I think that the cookie cutter approach yields that kind of bad design because, well, that's how we've been doing it. Or, you know, this is the format we use at this other store, without taking in the nuance of, hey, maybe at that store, the code allowed for a pull door, but then you went to another municipality and they require a push door for fire code, whatever. But you stayed with the same design where you have a handle on the inside and the outside, right? And even if you have a little placard that says pull or push, whatever the case might be, most people, they're going through life assuming that the designers, the engineers, the architects are watching out for them, you know, and you know, what you don't want to happen is somebody with a tray full of hot coffee, you know, pushing or pulling and slamming into the door.
I didn't think about that.
Right.
I was thinking about a burrito.
Yeah, burrito on your shirt, like you're going to a work or you know, a meeting or something. And so, you know, with the advent of AI, I think that we all have to be very conscious of the fact that this is a new tool that has great potential to increase productivity, reduce reliance on people to have to do repetitive menial tasks like spreadsheets and data entry and stuff. But it's not, again, just like the 6-axis robot or the other pick and place robots that exist, it's not a one size fit all solution. You know, I think that we as humans have so much to offer as far as in creativity, in compassion for other people, for the environment, for our customers, for the people that we serve. And AI is a tool that, yes, it is able to unlock our own creativity, but at the same time, we should still wield it for good, right? And, you know, I've been dabbling with AI a little bit. I designed a website in a couple of hours. I'm like, man, when I was in high school studying C++ and Java, it took me 8 hours just to come up with a little, you know, UI that was black and white, and you know, it went through the steps. And now I can just use conversational language, and it just generates what I want. I upload my work samples or whatnot, and it analyzes even the pictures that I upload and creates a little write-up. I'm like, okay, cool. Good. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah,
I'll go with that. But yeah, like I said, it's important to not just get absorbed by every new tool that comes out. Like, you got to have a library of tools at your disposal. And one of those is critical thinking. And it seems like that goes out the window the first time a new technology comes out. And it's like you can still take a step back and look at the playing field and be like, yeah, it's cool, and this tool would solve the problem, but are there other tools that would solve it in a less energy intensive way, more environmentally friendly way, in a more productive way? Long term, is there another tool that will allow me to do this with lower maintenance, right? And if the answer is no, then yeah, use the AI tools, right? Yeah.
Like, people are using robots for healthcare, like be an assistant to help someone with a variety of household tasks.
Yeah.
Like, that's a unique kind of role that a household robot would need to have many functions.
Yeah.
But in manufacturing, is that where a lot of your work is? In manufacturing?
Yeah. Most of my work has been in manufacturing. I would say about 75%.
Yeah.
But I've also worked a lot in actual spaces, meaning buildings, houses, office spaces. And my background in industrial design taught me that it doesn't matter how small, like if you're dealing with an iPhone size product or a house, your focus should be on the customer's experience, and not so much on the features, right, that are available. A lot of times, too many features makes the user experience not optimal, right? And so in architecture, walking through a space, at least in your imagination, and now with the advent of VR, you could do it with the tool, but you get a sense for the flow of the building. And you know, you can ask yourself questions like, if I'm doing laundry, how can I reduce the number of steps it takes to do that? Or if I'm in the kitchen and I'm making fries, how can I make that space as efficient as possible? And those same concepts translate directly over to manufacturing. When you're talking about 6S, lean manufacturing, you want to put all the tools that a worker needs at their disposal for the tasks that they're tasked to complete, instead of having them walk across the factory to do something that they're supposed to be able to do within a 6-foot or 10-foot radius, right? Just because the manufacturing engineers or whoever laid out the factory was thinking more 1 or 2 dimensionally, like how can I make the space as cheap or space as efficient as possible without taking into consideration the actual human that's going to be occupying and using that space, you know. So
Tell me about your patent pending.
yeah.
Tell me about that invention, what you were trying to do, and then what inspired you for the design.
Yeah. So basically, when I was at Wilbur Curtis, I was working on several different projects, you know, different grinders, evolutions of existing products. But one day, the business owners brought somebody to my attention who had developed a methodology. And this methodology was completely hands-on. They had a recipe for creating cold brew in 15 minutes, right, in a reduced, compressed time scale. And so basically it was a combination of, you know, having the right grind size, having agitation, a hot strike, and as well as a cold washing process. And it could have any number of permutations and combinations. Like you could do a hot strike, cold wash, and another hot strike, and then another cold wash. But the most basic was you're trying to unlock the CO2 that's in the coffee grinds, because the CO2 acts like linebackers to the water. As it's trying to escape the coffee grinds, it doesn't allow the water to come into contact with the solvents in the coffee, which is what you want for the drink. You want those dissolved solids to enter your final product, because that's what people like about cold brew, right? And so basically, I took the methodology and I took the constraints of the project. They said they wanted it, you know, 2 feet wide, this tall, this deep, you know, 33 or 30 inches deep, so that it would fit on any coffee shop counter, or at least back counter, because it didn't need to be a front of the coffee house type product. It could be in the back. But it basically would be replacing a toddy bucket and bag method that takes 24 hours. And the reason it takes 24 hours is because we're just allowing the water to diffuse the solids slowly, right? You can add a strike, or you could just do it without a strike. Either way, it changes the flavor profile according to whatever you're trying to get at. But with this process, we're more or less working with the natural process and accelerating it. And basically, we automated all of the steps that a human would take, except for loading the coffee and loading the filter, and made it so that it was more sanitary. It was easier to clean. It used actually less filter media, so it was more environmentally friendly. And it gave you a higher extract, right? So if you know about cold brewing, you know that the extract rate is somewhere around 12 to 15%, depending on what you do. With this machine, you're able to get numbers as high as 20 to 22 or 23%, which rivals espresso, and still have a ready-to-drink cold brew-like product, right? You're taking all the steps, but by using vacuum pressure and having the water percolate through the coffee bed, somewhat like you would see in a mocha pot or an espresso machine, you get a much more direct action, right? Where you suspend the solids into the liquid with a hot strike, and then you add the cold water to immediately cool it down to kind of control the extraction rate and bring everything straight to an anaerobic environment, right? A keg where the oxygen's been sucked out of it. So that allows you to have a shelf-stable product without the use of preservatives, without the use of any additives, and you immediately take that product and put it in the fridge, right? And there, it even had the ability to take the concentrate and add a dilution step. So it would dilute it for you with either room temperature water or chilled water, and it was pretty much ready to serve from there, right?
Ready to bottle.
Ready to bottle, or, you know, I guess the intent of that product was to put it in coffee shops, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I worked with the designers for the door, the handle, right? The industrial designers, and the UI for the interface, right? And pretty much just having the mindset of what does the end user want out of this product.
It makes sense why architecture is a clear cousin from product engineering, because you do have to interface with what does the customer want, the user, the end user, but also talk to all the materials people, the glass, the beams. Like every supplier that you're going to use, you have to check the load bearing and all the engineering side of it to make sure it holds up, or it's to code and all that.
Right.
So it is like an architect.
Yeah. You're just so involved with your customer. Mm-hmm. And you don't always get to interact with the end user, but at least if you're working with somebody who understands the end user, they can kind of game plan for you. Hey, this is what I imagine they might experience. Because a lot of times the temptation as the engineer, designer, or architect is to just say, I got my training, I have my experience, I have my background, I can do this on my own, right? And you just go through and you miss, it goes over your head, hey, what am I doing this for? Is it for a paycheck? Is it for notoriety? No, it's to serve people and their needs. Like when you build a building, it's gonna stand there probably beyond your own lifetime. And you want it to be of service to people, and people friendly for as long as possible, you know? So.
What kind of work is right in the sweet spot of what you do?
It sounds generalized, overgeneralized maybe, but I've been working in so many industries for so long that it's hard for me to even pick a favorite at this point.
Yeah.
So if I were to just pull back and say, what is my favorite type of work? It's just plain old problem solving. A lot of these methodologies are applicable to intangible processes as well as tangible outputs. Mm-hmm. So a business might benefit from looking at a process holistically and speaking to your clients about what they want to see resolved as far as what is a bottleneck in their business. Mm-hmm. And the solution may be a combination of hardware, software, standard operating procedures, and throw in a little AI to kind of help automate some of the more repetitive type of things. But recently I encountered a gentleman who has a company that serves the civil engineering trade. And I just spent 45 minutes listening to him talk about issues in interoperability of the equipment that he sells and he caters to his customer base and that he supports. And a lot of times this equipment, it talks on different wavelengths, radio-wise. And then the software that it runs on, the GIS software has to be translated into other softwares. And there's transcription errors. And so a lot of times all of the trades, they don't always agree on how high a certain hill or ramp angle should be according to what was designed.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
So,
Tell me about that product design.
well, I mean, this is great because this might be linked to a PLC that is constantly reading the light in the room. And, you know, this gets into architecture and passive buildings, right? LEED certified, gold, whatever certification you want to talk about. And instead of turning on a light, you open a curtain or you open a window and you get the airflow through that building. Somebody had to think of how to integrate all of these systems together and have it play well.
You mean this isn't out of the box? Just install it and
no, because
go.
I mean, sure, the motors and the screen is pretty off the shelf, but the integration into the computer of how all of this works together with the other systems, the air conditioning, the lighting, it takes very thoughtful implementation, right? You can't just go to Walmart and get a system installed and be like, it's going to adjust the sunlight outside, you know, to suit the needs of the people who are inside.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of companies have duct tape solutions together.
Yeah.
Over time, they got the automatic curtains.
Yeah.
And now there's a little iPad interface. And then they have also the air conditioning interface, and they have all these things that you might want them to talk together a little bit. You might want to have a centralized control.
Yeah, that bleeds into the concept of the Internet of Things, right? IoT it's a concept that would benefit a lot of different spaces. Like I mentioned, the gentleman who runs the civil engineering service business. The Internet of Things has been a thing for over 15 years. It just hasn't, I guess, diffused into all of the industries yet. And so it is a solution that would solve his problem, right? It would take the lack of interoperability of all that different equipment and fuse it so that the project managers and the engineers get real-time feedback of what's going on their job site. And instead of waiting on a report at the end of the week from each of the project heads for their individual discipline, you have real-time data stating, hey, this is how the pipe's being laid and the grading is happening for this particular project. Oh, we might need to just go out there and put a stop to this, because if this keeps going in this direction, we're going to have a major problem on our hands. Like if we wait until the end of the week to analyze all of this. And so it does take thoughtful implementation to put all that together. And you don't have to be an expert in any one of these fields. You just have to have the mindset of, I'm trying to solve a problem. And whatever tools I have to go and find and develop to solve this problem, I'll go get it, right? So yeah, that's what I think about.
And you have kids.
Yeah, I got 3 kids and one's on the way.
Does anything from parenting and kids inspire your work? Like, do you get ideas from being a dad?
Yeah, I would say that ever since my first child, I've learned more from my kids in the last 6 years about how to solve problems than working as an engineer, product designer, R&D engineer.
No way.
Yes.
I mean, I believe it.
Because I see how they develop and they learn and they solve their own problems. And It's just they have no preconceived notions. They have no limitations on their imagination. And I feel like even with all my training and the structure that I've added to hone my craft into something that's marketable and something that can generate income for me and my family, it pales in comparison to the human mind and the potential that is there. And one of the most important lessons I've learned from raising my kids, seeing them take these magnet toys and create new things and solutions, take these triangles and make completely new shapes that I have never even modeled in 3D CAD before. I'm like, I don't even know what to call that. Having that childlike mind and curiosity for the world has been such an asset to help people find solutions and find their way through the valley of despair, right? That a lot of business owners and engineers and customers have found themselves in has been such a relief, because it has taught me that every single problem has a solution. It's just a matter of, do you have the time and the patience to solve it, right? And if you take the limits off and you say, I've designed this thing and the machine doesn't work. Instead of just looking at this particular iteration of this machine and trying to make that work, taking a step back and say, why does it have to be in this form? Why does it even have to be in this embodiment at this point? What if we just look at it from scratch and see if there's anything we missed, right? Because a lot of times people will work within a paradigm that they've built over time, or within somebody else's paradigm, and they think that's the only world that should exist, instead of stepping out of that world and saying, well, let me look at the other worlds. Let me look at it, Victorian architecture and, fractals and fluid dynamics, and try to solve a business bottleneck, whether it's customer service or support, or starting up a R&D company of some sort.
Well, it's like if you wanted to get your friends together, you might start thinking, we need an app for our friends. We need some kind of communication, and it has to have a calendar, and it has to have this and all that. And then there might be one friend in the group that goes, why do we need all that? Why don't we just say every Sunday at 2 p.m. we meet here?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need to overcomplicate it. It's that we're getting our goal met.
Right. Instead of building an app and, just like what I was saying earlier, when a new technology comes up, instead of looking at the problems before you and saying, okay, what do the problems call for as far as a solution? You take a solution that is all the hype, all the trend right now, and say, how can I apply the solution to everything?
Yep. That's AI.
Yeah.
That is AI right now.
And
how do we apply it? Because everybody else is.
Yeah.
Apparently everybody else is, I don't know, making more money with it, or growing their business with it. I mean, there's a lot of that they're just investing a lot of money into.
Yeah.
But they're not seeing returns yet.
Right. And 90 to 98% of these startups are going to go nowhere, right? But the 5 to 2% that actually are applying AI appropriately, they're going to see an immediate return. Because they've understood that, hey, I have an existing problem and it hasn't been solved for millennia because AI has not existed.
Yeah.
This is the appropriate solution.
Yeah.
Let me pair it up.
Yeah.
But there's also problems that exist that don't call for AI,
Right.
right? And no doubt, AI is going to cause some kind of industrial revolution in the next 3 months to 3 years.
Yeah,
for sure.
I thought you were going to say 3 years, but 3 months is more
3 months
accurate.
is more realistic. But it's important not to lose sight of the fact that the human element is still a big player. And it's going to become that much more valuable in the world of AI when everybody sheds the horse and buggy, right? That brought us here in the first place.
It amplifies whatever your idea of execution is.
Yeah.
And so if you have an idea that's not creative and it's not serving the customer, now you add AI and you're gonna not serve them
even worse.
Right. It's gonna be like
you still have to be a visionary and understand that you have to be nuanced. Like you cannot be the hammer that everything looks like a nail to, right?
And it's confusing, I think, for a lot of people to look at what's going on and go, look at all of the investment into AI and all these startups. It's not reality. Right. That's R&D. That's the American investment. That's the venture capital complex of 90% fail rate.
Right.
So don't follow the 90%. Like, even would you go with that? I mean, if you follow what all of them are doing, you still have the same percentage of failure.
Right.
Even if you're not a startup, but you're just copying them.
Yeah. Everybody has to realize that what AI is a force multiplier. And so, you know, in the military, a new form of combat has arisen in the last decade or so. And that is the concept of having a commando with the fusion of every asset available to the United States military, fusing the Navy's capabilities, the Air Force capabilities, Space Force, the Army, the Marines, and looking at a battlefield holistically and saying, I'm the commando and I have all of this information coming my way. How would I best use these assets? Instead of it going to Washington, D.C. and a general who's very far away, having the commando on the ground, using these assets, putting it at their disposal to make the best decision based on their experience, what they smell, what they see, and what they feel on a daily basis. I think that same doctrine is applicable to the tools that are becoming available to our disposal as business owners, as project managers, as even freelance architects and civil engineers. You're able to use AI and robotics, AI-enabled CAD, project management tools way more effectively now. Because now you're not getting bogged down in spreadsheets. You get to step back and look at the playing field, and you're not waiting on a power structure with the CEO delegating to the director, delegating to his middle management to carry out a plan. Your objective is to succeed, right? And here are the tools. Go for it, right? And if we can, as a people who understand these tools, better use our resources, we can make it a better world, right? There's no reason that anybody should be starving at this point, you know? There's no reason that illiteracy rate should be anywhere below 99%. Knowledge is pretty much free now. We just got to get it to the people. And so, you know, me operating in the space that I'm in, architecture, construction, civil engineering, product design, you know, business administration, automation, all that, it's just a small piece of the puzzle. And so I hope that everybody in their space, in their area of expertise, can use all of these tools to further humanity's ability to serve each other, pretty much. That's pretty much the way I see it. Yeah. Yep. I'm gonna finish this coffee before it gets cold. Yeah.
I can't add to that, man.